Welcome to today's video. This is a short video that's going to describe some of the functions and the features that are available in Sage Intacct's project module. My name is Andy Saltmer. I'm a solutions consultant here at Acuity, and I'll be driving us through the presentation today. We'll get into the software in a few minutes, but what I wanted to do very quickly is just highlight a couple of things about the project module. So what we're looking at here is a quick PowerPoint slide, and you'll see there are 4 columns of information there. Really what this does is it just describes the different types of functionality that you can get within the projects module. So if we start on the left hand side, the most basic entry of project information in the system comes through an option called project tracking. This is mainly for businesses with simple project requirements. It allows the tagging of financial transactions and sales orders and purchase orders and that kind of thing with the project dimension, such that you can then perform reporting through the general ledger and think things like project profitability and P&Ls by project, that kind of stuff. So that's the most basic option. You can then choose to add to this or use separately time and expenses. So this is the ability to create timesheets within the system. We can tag those timesheets against employees. We can then also do things like tag them against the projects, of course, and then we can enter time against them. And these can capture and record costs and things like that. And also within that section we have the ability to create employee expense records, so we can have expense types, we can have approval routes on the things that I'm talking about here, and that's the second kind of set of functions that are available. Project costing is the combination of both of these things, so I won't spend too much time talking about that, but the main one really, and what we're going to cover off in today's video, is project costing and billing. So this includes everything that I've talked about previously in terms of time and expenses and project tracking, or the combination of both of those things, which is project costing. But it also includes the ability to utilize the project's billing engine. What this can enable you to do is create automated invoicing and different invoicing runs for your different types of projects. So typically these are in fixed price projects, or they are time and material based projects, and optionally they can include revenue recognition and elements of resource scheduling and things like that. So let's go ahead and have a look at the projects module within Intacct. What we're going to do is firstly cover off what the project record looks like, and then we'll go into some further detail around timesheets and what we can do in those areas and different types of cost we can capture. We'll look at a time and material example project, and we'll also look at more of a fixed fee type project as well, just to give a bit of a broad landscape of what's actually happening there. So let's go and log into the software. So what we're looking at here is the process map for the projects module. There is one of these for every different module, and you can see all of these listed here. But what we're going to do, as I've just said a minute ago, is we're going to focus on the project record first. So what I've done for the purposes of today's session is I've just created an example project. So you can see here I have a T&M example project. So firstly we'll look at the project record from the setup and perspective of a time and material based project. We have some information here, some general stuff, so we can give projects a name, we can give them categories and types, so these both can be used for reporting purposes. We can apply customers to that, and we can actually have a start and an end date to our project, which can span anything from a single day into multiple years, as you can see there as well. Just scrolling down a little bit, we have different statuses that we can apply to our project. You'll notice this one is in progress. These aren't just words, but again they can be used for reporting purposes, which we'll look at a little bit later. But what you can actually do with these is control the different types of transaction that can be posted to your project. For example, at this status we're currently in, we can post anything. So that's sales invoices, purchase orders, timesheets, expenses, that kind of stuff. But let's take an example of something that was completed We might not want anyone to still be posting costs through timesheets and other methods to that project, and we can turn that on and off. And if I just went and had a look at this very quickly and we just view this one, you can turn and prevent things on and off just by ticking these buttons just there. Okay. So moving on just very quickly, I'll flick that back. We have other things going on as well, so we can have different people that we apply to our project. So we can enter a project manager, we can have sales contacts, we can have external users, and you can see the word customer there. So we do have the ability to allow customers to come in and view their project, or maybe approve timesheets, that kind of stuff. But really where these are useful is what I've just mentioned. It's around being able to approve things within the system, which I'll touch upon a bit later. And just finally at the bottom of here, we have some general timesheet rules. So this can be as loose or as strict as you would like it to be. So what I really mean by that is, well, we can have these different settings that say things like time can be entered by any user. So it doesn't matter if they're on the project or not. Anyone can enter time against this project, which is quite a loose way of dealing with things, but is applicable to some businesses. You can then start to say, well, actually, I only want users that are assigned to the project to be able to enter time against it. And if we wanted to take that a little bit, another step further, we could say only users that are assigned to the project and to the task on that project can enter time. And we'll have a look at some examples of that kind of stuff in a few minutes. Just moving on and just have a quick look at some of the other stuff in here. So we do have this resourcing and pricing tab against the project. This is exactly where what I was just mentioning about how we can restrict people to projects or time entry and other things like that. So you can see here I have a list of people that are applicable to my project. You'll notice here I have Emma, I have Tom, I have Nikki and other people. But just to point out a couple of things of what you can do here, I can say, well, Emma, for every hour she works on the project, it's £100 an hour in a billable rate. Okay, but I can also say things like, well, actually, if Emma works on this particular item or this particular task on a project, we're going to charge that out at more or less, depending on which way you want to do that. And you can also kind of double that up and get a bit more functionality here and say, well, actually, this isn't related to anyone in particular, but for us to complete this particular activity on the project, we're going to charge £150 per hour, regardless of who's completing that task. We can do cost plus, so if you wanted to then start to come into here and do cost plus on any expenses, we could do that kind of thing. And likewise, we can do the same with any purchases as well. So if we're recharging our expenses of these particular items to our customers, do we want to charge it at the rate in which it was incurred, or do we want to uplift that? And we can choose to do that kind of stuff there. Other thing just to mention on the screen before we come away from it is this resource search function here. So you can have, if you want to find out who's available to work on your particular project when you're setting it up, you can use this resource function and you can filter by loads of different things here. I'm not going to read them all out. But one of the interesting things you can do here as well is you can start to search for people by skills. So I can say, well, actually, I need a consultant, and I'm going to search, and that then defines this list here. So here are all the consultants, here's when they're available and where their entity is and other things like that. But if I wanted to filter that further and say, well, actually, I need a consultant that speaks Mandarin, for example, I could filter that and then filter the search again. And there we have it. Look, we only have one within our company. It is Emma, who's already on our project. But if I wanted to select from here, I simply tick this, apply the selection, and the users and the employees there would then be added to our list on our project. So it's a really nice way of searching for people and knowing who's available to work on your projects. Moving on, I will touch upon this a little bit later once we start seeing some things happening within the system, but basically what this screen is, it's a nice snapshot of what the position is of your particular project. So I'll explain what some of this is now, and then we'll come back to this a little bit later once I've started processing some transactions. Ultimately what we're doing here is we can see a financial summary. What I've not really covered in this video, but I have in other ones, is is the fact that Sage Intacct operates on a multi-entity accounting structure. What that means is I can operate many entities, which are these things here, in a single instance of this product. So I don't have to log in and out. If I work across on a single project across multiple entities, I can see the entire position within this screen. So this is why there are so many rows on here. But I can choose to configure this how I want, this particular view. But in my example, the way my data is set up, I have deferred revenue, I have a build, a revenue, total cost, which we then split out by expenses and by labour, and then we can see a gross profit and a net income, each by each individual entity, and we'll see this get populated as we go through. We can add some budget information, so we can have budgeted billing amounts, budgeted cost amounts, budgeted hours, and as we start transacting against our project through the different sub-ledgers within the system, you'll notice this kind of information changing as we go along. So we can see, again, a different split here of what's actual billing, what's total cost, and what the actual hours are, and then different breakdowns, so breakdowns by hours, so we can see what's billable, what's non-billable, what we have billed and what's yet to be billed in that example, and a very similar one for expenses, any purchasing, any purchase orders, so we can see what's billable, non-billable, what's billed, yet to be billed, and any purchase order commitments which might be affecting our projects. And finally, just before we finish this look at the project record, we have this option within the system called tasks. So mine's a pretty flat structure. I only have 5 tasks assigned to this particular project. But if I had wanted to have this needs analysis in this example as a particular task, and then a number of tasks underneath that, I could. You'll notice that the billing flag's set against these, so you can choose whether these tasks are billable or just actual tasks that relate to maybe a particular milestone or something like that, because we can deal with milestone billing as well. So how you choose to set these up is really dependent on how you run your projects and what's involved in there, and how you want to bill. Is it time and material, like in this example, i.e. there are no milestones, we're just invoicing as we incur costs? Or do you have more of a structured fixed price kind of thing where each of these particular tasks would be a milestone and we would potentially bill at the end of every one of these? So I think the first place for us to start after having a look at the project record is for us to talk about timesheet entry and some of the components and the things in relation to that. So what we're looking at here is the process map for time and expense. And before we actually go into entering timesheets and other things, we'll just have a look at something that in relation to the employee record. So if I come into here, what you'll notice is that I have a list of employees within the system, and there's this kind of hierarchical view here. So these people here with the blue button here, they all work for Tom. Tom works for Emma, and you could, if you wanted to, use this as an approval process. But the main reason I wanted to come into here is for a couple of things. Against each individual employee, when I started talking about the positions and skills, we can add them to the employee record there. So that's how I got to this consultant who speaks Mandarin option, which I showed a few minutes ago. But the main reason I wanted to come in here before we do anything is to talk about these cost rates. So against each individual employee, we can set them up as either being hourly rate or annual salary, and this is used by the system to determine the costs that are posted to a project as and when time is recorded in the system and approved, should we be using approval routes. So as you can see here, from the 1st of January last year, the annual salary of Emma in this example is £52,000. That is just my simple way of doing this, just to talk about numbers. But in the background, I set up in the system what my weekly number of hours is. So in my system it's 40. So if I worked 40 hours in any one week, £1,000 worth of cost would be attributed to the project or projects that are worked on within that time period. Okay. So I just wanted to say that first, because that will make a little bit more sense once we start looking at the costs and things against the project. But for us to go and enter a timesheet into the system, I could just come to this option here. I can enter a new timesheet. The system will default to this week, in this instance, and then I can add a description in here if I wanted to, and we can also attach things into the system as well. So I could drag and drop anything into here, so what might be relevant. This, for the purpose of what we're talking about here, this could be a site visit report. So you might have someone on site who's completed a load of work, they've got a document, the customer signed that document, and they want to attach that into here to show that the work has been completed. But it could be anything. It doesn't matter what type of file format it is really. It could be anything. In terms of how we then enter time against a project, this is configurable, what I'm about to show you now. So what I mean by that is I'm working on weekly timesheets. I could do this on a daily timesheet. I could do this bi-weekly, so 1st to the 15th of the month, 16th to the end of the month, and have a bigger grid here. I'm working in units of hours, but I don't necessarily have to. It could be other different units as well. It's just the way that my system's set up. So when I come into here, I can come into here and I can pick my project. So here's my T&M example. I pick which task it is that I want to record time against. So let's say we were doing the build process. You can see that billable tag flag has been ticked because of what's defaulted on the project. And then I just go away and enter my time here. So there's my full week, shall I say. If I wanted to add some additional notes into here, I can do. And then whoever's approving this can see the additional notes, for example. If we work on multiple projects within a single week, we simply just come into here, or different parts of a project within a single week. We would come into here, we would keep adding this and keep adding the different projects and the different tasks and adding the time in there until we were happy that we've completed our timesheet. One thing I've not really touched upon here is this time type option. So you do have the ability within the system to have different time types. So the most simple and common one here is overtime. So if I click overtime here and maybe did 2 hours there, the cost of that time would be charged at time and a half in this example, because behind this time type I have a cost rate that says it's 1.5, not 1 as per usual. Okay, so you can have different time types that can incur different cost rates if you wanted. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to get rid of that. What I could have done here is I could have saved this timesheet as draft. So if I was building this out up throughout the week, I could then save it as draft, come back in the next day, do my time for that day, save it as draft. But ultimately, once I'm happy with this and I'm happy with the time that I've input against my timesheet, all I do is come and submit that timesheet. And once I submit it, that will then send that off, and depending on how you configure the system for approvals, will be submitted to someone within the business. My system's set up to use the project manager as the person who approves timesheets. It doesn't have to be that way. It just makes sense for the purposes of this video. So what happens then? Well, as you've just seen here, here's a list of timesheets. There's my timesheet for this week. We can see it's at a submitted status. What can happen if you configure the system in such a way, if I just drag this onto here, this is a test Outlook mailbox that I've got set up for the purposes of presenting within Intacct. And what this does is it represents different people. So there's Emma, who I'm logged in as. Here's Carla, who was the project manager, and there's Tom down here as well. Less important for today's session. So Emma's submitted her timesheet, and we can have this system set up so that you can see this here, and that's about the right time. Carla can receive an email. So Carla receives an email. It says, here's a timesheet. Emma's created that timesheet. I can click the link to go and log in and review that, or I can do it in a couple of different ways. So firstly, if I wanted to go and review and improve timesheets through Sage Intacct, I would come in, I would log into the system as Carla, either through that link or through my normal login, however I get into the system. And for me to approve that, I would just come to this option there. So and then go into there, and then that would show me the timesheets that are available for me to approve. But I could do this in a different way as well. So We could be in a situation where Carla isn't in the office, but she's received this email on her phone and she still wants to be able to approve the timesheets. Well, if I just show you this, how this would be represented, so if I just come and log into Intacct as Carla, but actually if I just click this button here, if Carla was on her iPhone or her Android or other type of smartphone, depending on your preference, this is how the system might look. So as soon as I go and log in here, what actually will happen is I'll be presented with a different view, and you can see this here. This is the view that you'd be presented with on your smartphone. I can come into here, I can click on the approvals just here, and when we go into there is that it starts to show all of the different things that we can then start to approve, be it purchasing or other things as well. You can see here I have some timesheets. There's one there because there's one new timesheet. If I come into here, here's my timesheet that Emma submitted. If there were any attachments, I didn't do anything, but if I attach something to this, you'd be able to see the attachments. I can see all of the different hours. It's quite straightforward in this particular example here, because we just did a full week. But if I'm happy with this, I could just come into here and say, yes, I'm going to approve that time. And that actually approves the time within Intacct. So, how does this actually look? Well, if I just refresh this screen very quickly, you can see now that excuse me, just do this again very quickly. You can see, yeah, that there's my timesheet, that's now been approved. I just needed to wait a few more seconds. So we now have an approved timesheet. Because that timesheet's been approved, we can now start to see some of the costs against the project. So if I just go back and have a look at this project we were looking at a moment ago, what you should be able to see, if I come and click on this summary here, if I scroll down to my UK services entity here, we're now starting to see costs appear, and we can see there's the cost, and here's the labour costs and other things here. So as we're going along, this is a moving target, but it gives you a really good, up-to-date and accurate reflection of what's actually happening within the project and what the position of it is. Just whilst we're on timesheets, a couple of other things here. There is a timesheet inquiry screen, so this is particularly useful for businesses where you have to chase people to do their time. And again, this isn't the best of views here, but what you can see here are a list of different people. And why this isn't the best of views is because my data's a little bit out of date and rubbish. But you can see a list of people. You can see the little key down here that says this is time that's missing, this is time that's entered, this is time that's submitted for approval, and this is time that's approved. So you can see there's Emma and there's the time that's in the system that's been approved. All of this stuff is missing, and what's really nice about this is you can then start to see, well, are we waiting for people to approve it? Are we waiting for people to enter it? Where is the hold up here? And what you can actually do is start to message individual people, and even maybe the managers of these people. So I can pick those people, I can choose to send emails, send it to those, CC their manager in, what is it I want to say. So there's an issue with your timesheet, there's a timesheet that's late, all of that kind of stuff, and I just click this button there and it will go and fire them an email and give them a reminder to go and process their timesheets or process an approval, whichever part of the process that this lives in. So if we just look at expenses quickly, I'm not going to spend a great deal amount of time here. But if I just come back to the process map, and the reason for that is it's a very similar process to what I've just described. The difference is we can also have these expense types, so we can categorize our expense types within the system, link them to GL accounts, such that the end users aren't having to go and pick a GL account, they're going to pick mileage or meals or internet, hotels, that kind of stuff. In terms of entry, it's very, very similar to what I've just described with the timesheets. I come into here, I can have a currency, I can attach receipts and things to here. My system's configured here to make sure you have to give a reason for your expense, but again, that's not mandatory. And from here we do a similar kind of thing. So I come into here, I pick my particular project, I pick a task on that. I can pick an expense type if I wanted to. So I go and pick something there. Let's go and pick a hotel. It was for £150. Quantities, that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but we enter the expense in this particular kind of way. We can save them as draft. We can submit them once we're happy with them. And then the approval process that I just talked about can be very similar. So for a project, it might go to the project manager. If it's general expenses that we're recording, it might go to the employee manager, which was like the hierarchy that we looked at earlier. So it follows a similar kind of process, albeit we can route the approval in different ways. Okay. From a purchasing perspective and different types of costs that we can apply to our project, well, I can enter a purchase order or an invoice or something, and actually what I can do against that is I can tag that to, if I just go and edit this particular one, I can tag that to our project. So you can see here, when I've set up this particular invoice, I've said it's to this example time and materials project that we have and we've created. So you can see the project fee is my item. I can give it link it to an entity. I can link it to a project. I can link it to a task on there. Is it billable or not? And we can add in the different quantities, values, that kind of stuff as well. When we talk about this kind of stuff, and when I mention it, again, if I went back into here and looked at our project positioning, that expense would appear on our project. But really, from a time and material perspective, how does the system then operate from a billing point of view? Well, if I just come into here very quickly and I'll just go into this particular entity where that project lives, what I can actually do within the system is I can run through the projects module this generate sales invoice routine, and what this actually does is allows me to set up different filters. So I can say, well, is it when it's this customer type? Is it when it's this particular project type? Go and group all of these projects because I want to invoice them. Invoice me everything for this project manager, or things between start and end dates, and other things as well we can choose to include in there. But ultimately I come into here, I pick a template for my document, and I say, well, what is it? What is it am I invoicing by customer? So you could be in a situation where you have multiple projects for the same customer, but you want to run the invoicing all together. Or in my example, I'm just going to go and pick a particular project here. So just to keep it simple, if I come into here and pick this particular project, I can choose to save the document as something that's posted, or I can save it as draft. So if I wanted someone to go and review this before we then distribute it to the customer, we can absolutely do that. If we just talk for a minute about these options across the top just here, what we can actually do prior to creating an invoice is we can run a pre-bill report. So this will run a report which shows you all of the entries that the system is recommending that you that are to be billed. We have this preview option here. This actually does a similar thing to the report, but it shows you it in a screen view. The advantage of this option is that if you have maybe large projects with lots of different entries in terms of timesheets and purchases and expenses, that kind of stuff, you can review it on the screen. And let's say there was a dispute or something like that on a couple of hours or a particular day, from this preview option you can actually edit before you then go and generate the invoice. And then naturally we have the generate sales invoice option. So once we're happy with our selection, we can come into here, we can click the sales invoices, and it will generate the sales invoice. So what happens next? Well, once we've generated our invoice, we might want to distribute that to our client. So what we can do, there's a couple of different ways we can do this in the system. If I just come into here and look at my list of invoices, what you'll see there is this second one in the list. I'll just resort this. There we go. So here's our invoice that was just generated from the billing routine from projects. If we want to distribute this particular invoice, so there's, as I said, a couple of ways of doing this. We can do it singly. So I can come into here on just this particular one, click this option. You'll notice that I can set this to email. It will default an email address from the customer account, and that could be one of many depending on who the contact is against that particular invoice. We can copy people in, we can blind copy people in, we can have different email formats and templates that we can set up in the system, and we can send it from a specific person. If I just go and view this PDF attachment very quickly, this is just a standard invoice document that we're looking at here. Naturally, we can change all of this stuff, so your logos can go in here and we can move everything around. But what you'll see here is there's our individual time entries for each day, plus our purchasing recharge, and then that's what the system has generated as an invoice. If we're happy with this, we can just choose to OK here, and that will go away and it will email our client the invoice. As I said, there are other ways of doing this. You don't have to do them individually. Here's this print and manage an email documents option here. If you did a run, and let's say you had 100, 200, however many invoices in a particular run, you can distribute them all at the same time through this option here. So what we've looked at so far is at a reasonable high level is how we set up projects. It's how we can then record costs against that project. And in the billing example we've just looked at, it's how you can use the billing engine within the projects module to generate invoices on a time and material basis. So if we look at now the fixed fee options, where does that differ and how's the setup different? So if I just pop back across to here, what we're actually looking at is a project I already had set up. So this is a fixed fee project with milestones. Generally, the setup of this is very, very similar to what I showed before. I'll just point out a couple of things that are slightly different. So within this information here, excuse me, you can see we now have a billing type set to fixed fee and expenses. We can still choose to recharge things, expenses and purchasing should we wish, or we could just switch that off. In terms of resourcing the project, all of the same stuff still applies. It's just that this charge rate is no longer applicable because we, as the name suggests, are doing things in a fixed fee manner. The only other thing really you might want to do slightly differently is how you organise your tasks within the project. So you can see here, this is similar to what I showed earlier, but I have a needs analysis task and a design task, and then I have a billing milestone 1. So I've just separated the main parts of my project with a billing milestone, and you can see each of these milestones are marked as being required to be billed rather than the individual tasks. So that's it from a setup perspective. The other thing that goes alongside a fixed fee project is a project sales order. So if I just go ahead, I'll just come and look at this. So this is a sales order I set up a little while ago for a fixed fee project. So what you can notice here is we have all the same kind of information as we would have normally on a sales order. But what we do on the line entry is we reference each of our milestone tasks. So you can see there's setup, there's training, there's go live, we can have quantities against them, we reference our project, and the task that we reference is the billing milestone. So you can see we've referenced billing milestone 1, 2 and 3 on each individual line, and each of those milestones has a cost, has a charge associated to that. What we can also do on top of this is leverage these things here called billing templates. So these can be set up in many different ways, and if we just go and have a look at these, not that one, excuse me. If we just go and have a look at these, in fact, let's just look at this one. So this is a milestone task observed % complete, and what this basically says is as soon as the task this task is completed 100%, we're going to bill or invoice 100% of that particular task. You can set these up differently. These can be based on estimated hours, observed % complete, and loads of other things as well. But if I just again look at this as a different example, this is just a milestone task. It's based on observed % complete of that particular task, so that billing milestone. But what if we wanted to do something a little bit different? So we could say, well, once someone's marked this task 20% complete, we're going to bill 20%. Once it gets past 70% complete, we're going to invoice the next 50%. And once it's completed in its entirety, we're going to bill the final 30%. Again, not that common for most businesses, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of things you can do there. Finally, and this might not be relevant to all businesses, but we have the ability to attach revenue recognition schedules to our fixed price offers, fixed price sales orders as well. So if I come into here, if I come into here, I can view the summary on these lines, and you can see here's the RevRec schedule that's been generated. In this instance, I picked a straight line for 12 months. We've not started it yet. It's for £15,000. It shows us what's deferred, what our next posting date is, what the next posting amount is. And if I go and view the schedule itself, it shows me all of the double entry that's going to be posted and on what dates that's going to happen. And again, these revenue recognition schedules can be edited. You can create your own, but I'm just using a pretty generic straight line version there. Okay. So from a billing perspective, couple of things to kind of point out here. So instead of us using time and materials where the system's going, it's working out all of the costs based on timesheets and purchases and all of that kind of stuff. The way that I set this up is, you can see here that I have a billing milestone. So what would happen on this particular project is someone would come into here, they would mark the task, so this milestone task, as complete. We would say, yeah, as of today, and go and pick today's dates. We think this is 100% complete. Once this is saved, in the background, this enables that particular line for billing. And it operates in the exact same way I've shown before. So you come into the project's billing engine down here. We go and select our criteria, so what our invoice template is, what dates there are we invoicing by customer or by project, and everything that I showed before, and the different filters. And then we can run the same options, so we can run our pre-build report, we can run our preview, we can generate invoices, and then we can go ahead and we can distribute those out of the system. So they're the two main kind of options, and really, and there's loads of variation upon this because different businesses have different requirements in relation to projects. But other than that, the only other real things that I was going to cover today are more around different types of reports. So if we just look at a couple of very quite generic, or in my system, generic examples, just to give an idea of the kinds of thing that you can do. What we're looking at here is a resource manager dashboard. So here we can see a top level of what the total hours are that have been worked, what's been utilised, what's billable, what's non-billable, and an overall utilisation percentage. We can have different charts and different graphs and dashboards and that kind of thing. In this instance, we're looking at hours trends, and again, these individual records here show what is billable and what's non-billable and that kind of stuff. We can attach reports to these as well. So we can see in this example utilisation by title, and that means by job role. And you can see there are, not surprisingly, the directors aren't that particularly utilised, and why would they be? But again, if you wanted to filter that down a bit further and show individual employees, so we can see them there, everyone seems to be doing okay. We might want to give Ryan and Catherine a bit of a kick because they're not very well utilised, and there's loads of different examples of this kind of stuff. So there's a different spin on the utilisation report listed by employee, and then we can see what their utilisation was on a quarter by quarter basis. Just as easily that could be monthly, and other kind of filters as well. In terms of other kind of project reports, this dashboard is more of a financial kind of summary of where we are with our projects. Again, we can see the hours worked, but we can see what the total labour cost is, and what our other expenses are, what our revenue we're earning, what our total gross profit is across all of these things. And what's nice about these, actually, I didn't really point that out, is the fact that you can drill down into these. So if I wanted to go and drill into these, I can see what's billable, what's non-billable. If I want to go and look at the billable hours, I can see all of the individual entries that then make up that particular value that's on that performance card. I could, of course, filter these dashboards. Again, I didn't mention that, but I'm filtering this by the UK, and I'm doing it by all active projects. I might want to then filter this by a particular project manager, or just for a particular project, and you can see those are listed there as well. But if I just continue down, project snapshot, not too dissimilar to the financial view that I showed on an individual project earlier, but it gives a nice
view of what's in AR, what's billed, revenue, what hours have been worked, what our costs are, other expenses, and you can see what the margin percentages are against each of our projects. Other things here, so we can see stuff like what's been approved in terms of timesheets and expenses, so this would list those out, and incidentally we could do the same with what needs to be approved. Project actual versus budgets, apologies, my data is slightly out of date and doesn't read that well, so apologies for that. And then we can see actuals versus budgets that we've set up based on the individual tasks that are available against our projects as well. So there are loads of other things in terms of reporting and things you might want to do. So there is all this kind of stuff. So if I go into the projects module, you will see all of these different reports. So, excuse me, employee time reports by customer, by project, and different project reports. There are absolutely loads of standard reports that you can also utilise and run within the system. That's all I was going to cover for today's session. Hopefully that's given you a nice overview of some of the features and the functions that you can achieve with Sage Intacct projects. If anyone's got any further questions, do feel free to reach out to your business executive or account manager or customer success agent, and thank you for watching.